continue with data types. With data type, as we discussed, just a recap, we had integer values and float types. The difference between integers and float types are integers are whole numbers and float types are when you have fraction, all right? The easiest distinction between the two is whenever you see a period, that means you have a fraction, right? So that indicates that you have a floating type value. If you don't have that period, that means you have an integer value. There are specific character that could go into creating a number. The first one is basically having some digits, right? So I can have digits 1 to 9 to create a number for me, okay? Value 45 has digits 4 and 5. Value 32 has 3 and 2 in it, all right? So you can have digits, all sort of, actually 0 to 9, sorry, to create a number for you. So 90 creates number 90 for you. And if you have that fraction, that period, that creates a float type for you. So if I say 5.2, as soon as I see that fraction, that means I'm creating a float type for myself, okay? So far we have 0 to 9, those are valid characters to have in a number. We have period is a valid character to have in a period, in a number or a numeric value. The other one that we have is optional sign character. So you can have plus or minus to create positive or negative numbers. So if I say plus 2, that's a positive number. If I have negative 5, I have a negative number. All right? So you can add that optional sign character to your number to create either positive or negative number. By default, if you don't have that sign character, it's going to be a positive number. So assume it is a positive sign. If you put that negative sign, then it negates the number for you. So those are the three that we have so far. The other one that we are going to discuss later is the letter E that you can have in a number, and that you can create numbers in a scientific format. We will talk about that, not now, but just know it's one of the valid characters you can have in a number. So let's play with the first three, digits, period, and optional sign characters to create different numbers. So I'm going to continue with the numbers that I have here. So if I have 2.5, I have that period. So I'm creating a float type, right? If I add the negative sign to it, so it's like negative 2.5, now I'm negating that number, I'm creating a negative number. If I have positive 2.1, it creates a positive number. You see, it ignores that positive sign because by default, it is going to be a positive value, okay? And then with period, whenever you put it, it creates a float type. So now, here I have a couple of questions. Tell me what data types these numbers are. So 5, what data type you think it is? It is an integer because, first of all, it has some digits in it. It has digit 5. It doesn't have the sign character, but by default, it's positive. And then it doesn't have that period, so it's an integer value. So it has all of the valid character that goes into a numeric value, and since it doesn't have that period, we know it is an integer value. So this is an integer value, and you see there's no fraction or anything, so we have an integer value. Okay, so next example is going to be 5.2. What is a numeric value? We know that. We have all of the valid allowable characters. We have 5, we have 2, we have period, right? So those are all allowed to have in a number. So it's a numeric value. But what type of numeric value? Is an integer value or a float value? So this one is a float value because we have that period. So this is a float type. All right, so now my next example, which is a bit tricky. 5.0. Is this an integer value or a float type? Okay, so it all goes back to that period, right, that you have in that number. Whenever you see a period, it is a float type. it is a float type, no exceptions, right? So you have a float type even though the fraction part of it is 0. So we still have a float type here. What about this one? Is this a float type or an integer? I don't have that 0 part, but I do have the fraction part. I have the period. All right, would I call this one a float type or an integer? Okay, think about it. If you need to pause the video and think about it, do it. All right, so if you're coming back, this is again a float type. All right, again, the way you identify a float value is by that period. If you see it, it doesn't matter what comes after it. It is going to be a float type, right? So when you see the fraction, that period, it is a float type. It's a numeric value, it's a float type, and that's it. If it doesn't have that, then it is not a float type. If we just have 5 without any period, that's an integer value, okay? And in next video, I'm going to show you how to actually call for the type of it and be sure that it is either integer or float type. Okay, so now a couple of things that goes into the arithmetic operators that we used, right? So with all of these arithmetic operators, when you apply them, and when you have 2 operands or more and you have an arithmetic operator, it's going to look at the data type of your operands and decide what the result is going to be, right? With all of these, with the exception of division, I'm going to separate division from the rest, is going to look at the operands that you have, the type of the operand that you have, and it's going to make a decision of the type of the result, right? So let's see an example of it. If I have 2 plus 2, both operands are integer types, right? So the result is going to be an integer because both operands are integer values. If I have 2 multiplied by 1 or by 10, let's do that, both operands are integer values. So the result is going to be an integer. But as soon as you add a float type to it, the result is going to change to a float type. So if I have 2.1 multiplied by 10, the result is going to be a float type, right? Because it's going to look at the data type and it's going to keep the information. It's not going to let you to lose any information. When you have that fraction, and if it takes away that fraction, you're going to lose some piece of information. It's not going to do that unless you ask it explicitly, which we get to it later on. But for now, it's going to keep the type that is more general. And float is more general. It has more information in it. So if you have at least one operand that is type float, the result is going to be type float. Okay, if both are type float, result is type float. If neither are type float, the result is going to be an integer, okay, which we saw an example of that here. But again, as soon as one of them is type float, the result is going to be a float type, okay? So it is same for all of the operands all of the arithmetic operators that we talked about, except with the exception of division. Let's see more examples and then we get to the division. So if I have 2 to the power of 3, the result is going to be 8. And since both operands are type integer, the result is going to be type integer. If I have at least one of them that is not type integer, if it's type float, the result is going to be type float, even though the fraction part is 0. Right? It won't care about what the fraction is. It's going to keep it the general form. Okay, so now let's talk about division. With division, if I have 4 divided by 2, the result is going to be a whole number. Like 4 divided by 2 is going to give you 2. But there are cases in which you divide 2 numbers and there must be a fraction. Okay, so 5 divided by 2 is going to be 2.5. So it's not going to take away that fraction part for you. It's going to keep the entire information. For that reason, they define division as an operator that always gives you a float type because they want it to give you as much information as possible and not getting away any information from you. So even if you have two operands that are type integer and the result is going to be whole number, it's going to keep it a float type, okay? So with all of the operands that we had, it's going to give us, it's going to look at with all of the operations, it's going to look at the operand type and decide what type the result is going to be, with the exception of division. Division always gives you a float type, okay? So we are going to end this video here, just play with them more, and in the next video we are going to talk more about how to create an object and create a variable.